Hello, I'm Tim Mousel, and I will be moderating and serving as a panelist for tonight's discussion on EdTech, startups, and AI, how it integrates into the new world of EdTech. So we've got some great panelists here this evening, and we'll start off with some introductions, and then we'll get right into the questions. So Rachelle, if you'd like to start.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim, and glad to be here. So my name is Rachelle Dené Poth. I am a lot of things. I'm a full-time during the day teacher. I teach Spanish and STEAM, a course that's focused on emerging technology and basics like digital citizenship and how to properly send an email to your teachers. I also work as a full-time consultant, and I'm an attorney. Just do a lot of work with just different school districts, professional development, some ed tech companies, and just love learning and seeing if I can share what I know to help others to get started, especially whenever we're talking about like ed tech and these emerging technologies like AI. So long time learner, I will say, is kind of like my motto there. So thank you so much.
Excellent. And Silvan.
And my name is Silvan. I started off producing theatre shows, which turned into soft skills trainings, and built that up quite successfully over Asia. And when the pandemic hit, I went back to university, dug deeper into the learning, design, and technology space, and have since been advising startups while being a teaching fellow at the Graduate School of Education here at Harvard.
Okay, excellent. And my name is Tim Mousel. I've been teaching in higher education for I hate to say this, for 30 years. And I'm in the kinesiology field. Back in like 1990, I taught myself how to do programming. So starting in September, when I came across the OpenAI API, I created Pocket AI, which is an educational tool utilizing AI. And previous to that, I created a platform for physical education and kinesiology called eFit software. And I've currently incorporated AI into that as well. So I have experience as well on the teaching side as well as the EdTech side. So let's get started with the questions. What key trends are currently shaping the EdTech startup landscape, and how have they evolved in recent years?
Great first question.
Yes.
You want to go, Silvan, or you want me to take that one from a multi-view kind of an angle?
Ladies first.
All right. So
kind.
Yeah, I know. So one thing that I will say, with the especially in the last couple of years, like the way that things from an educator's perspective and somebody who does go out and do, lots of research and presentations and just absolutely loves ed tech, the past 3 years since schools closed until now, I've done a lot of presentations at conferences and written a lot of blogs and a lot of research about ed tech and how to use, technology effectively in my classroom, purposefully, and always focusing on the why. But it has been interesting, especially in the last couple of years, to see the impact of things like school closures and the need for, everybody, not just specific to education, but like trying to figure out how to keep like learning going or how to keep working together when you couldn't be in the same physical space. And so, that is a big trend, how to shift everything to like online, to communicate, these emerging technologies and how they can be leveraged in all different aspects. But again, in my classroom, a lot of what I focus on in my STEAM course and even in my Spanish classes too is like augmented virtual reality. And then for the past 5+ years, I've been talking and teaching about AI, and what has really jumped forward, especially since, ChatGPT last end of November, beginning of December, has been all this focus on AI. And that's all anybody is talking about. And it's kind of interesting for me to go back and see when I first started, like people were kind of really interested in it, but they weren't sure about it. Is it going to stick around? Or is it just a fad? And then, with each progressing year, it's like, okay, it's kind of here. Now, what are the benefits? And now in this year, just from the beginning of the year till now, the the way that things are changing and the way that, I mean, educators specifically are embracing some of these new technologies that are out there and seeing like, oh yeah, there are tons of benefits. I think there have been, I always say that the school closures and the pandemic, I mean, all the negatives aside, looking at the positives from an educator perspective, or even from the workforce, like it really made you focus on what you're doing. And for some people who didn't want to use EdTech because they didn't need it, everything I'm doing is just fine, it forced them to kind of go down that road to explore new ideas that maybe were totally out of their comfort zone, but you didn't have a choice. And so a lot of these trends that we're seeing are bringing in new technologies because you see how many different ways it can facilitate and keep learning or working or just communications between people going. So it's been an interesting couple of years, and we'll see what happens in the next year. I just feel like everything is moving at such a fast speed now. So I'm curious for what 2024 is going to bring too. And I'll stop with that.
Absolutely. Silvan, you want to jump in or you want me to go?
Sure. So I think I've been in the interesting position of having started off with a very much sort of an offline traditional training company where there was almost no technology in there, to having brought things online, to now working with a bunch of startups that are exclusively working online. And I see two major trends happening right now. I mean, obviously, AI is a given, and I think over the next couple of months and years, I think we'll go from personalization to integration on the product side. And then on the market side, I think we'll go from the proliferation to consolidation. So I think on the product side, right now everything's about personalization. So the big promise of AI is that everybody can have their own tutor, their own co-pilot, and that you can basically, you don't even need to go into school. You can just do it on your laptop or your phone. And my hunch, I suppose, is that there'll be not a backlash against that, but that people will discover that having some kind of like AI personalized experience is not enough, and that we'll need to integrate that with an in-person experience that will, students don't like being in front of a computer to learn. Students love learning from their classmates, and teachers love to be in the classroom. And I think that's an interesting area that we'll see a lot of movement in, seeing how can the best EdTech companies revive the in-person experience through technology, kind of like an integration kind of thing. And then on the market side, I have the feeling that over the past, during the pandemic, there was a huge funding boom. Thousands and thousands of startups were launched. And I think now that we're in a bit of a funding winter, and I think it'll continue over the coming months and perhaps years, I think we'll see a consolidation in the market. Some of the some startups will be weeded out, and others will be bought out. So those are kind of my two trends.
Okay, great. And according to Futurepedia, there have been 5,400 AI programs and apps created since November of last year, and 5,400. So it's just been exploding and blowing up. But one trend that I'm going to predict after today, what happened today, and if you're not familiar, OpenAI had a 1 hour, basically a press conference in which they announced all these amazing new features that they're adding to their platform. I will predict that out of those 5,400 programs and apps based on AI, probably 75% of them will be out of business as of today's announcement. because the features that they announced in their programs will make a lot of these programs obsolete that were using the backend API. So, you know, any type of lesson plan generator, even tutoring, it's so easy now because the way it's going to work with ChatGPT is you can use natural language to program it. You don't even have to write code to use the API. Natural language, you tell it what you want, you can feed it your documents, and it will feed information based off of those documents and the personalized bot that anyone can create. So that is going to be a huge change in the entire educational system in terms of access for using these powerful tools. You know, up until now, there was a lot of great accessibility to use these things, but to use the API, you had to be a programmer. And it really levels the field to where you don't have to be a programmer to get a lot of the benefits from using the API. Some other trends that I see, as you mentioned, personalization is huge. That's definitely moving in that direction. It is now, and it's going to continue moving that way. But I can see growth of micro-credentialing as well as skill-based certifications for higher education. 4-year degrees are fantastic, but specific competency-based certifications I can see expanding because the knowledge is there, the tutoring is there, and I can really see it growing in that area. So any other input before we move to the next question?
So I was fascinated by the idea that, you know, with these new OpenAI capabilities, a lot of the current companies might soon be out of business. I mean, one of the hottest startups right now is Magic School, which has exploded over the past 5 or so months. Essentially, making it easy for educators to generate lesson plans, exercises, assignments, and all of these kind of things. Now, on the tech side, I think it's not that hard to replicate it, but my feeling is that education systems can be sticky, and that the user interface plays a key role. So I suppose I'm curious to know what you think. Do you think companies like Magic AI, which are doing really well right now, will soon be out of business, or will teachers keep using them just because it's easier than interacting? It's just like slightly easier than interacting directly with OpenAI.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think the big players like them, I think they can survive because teachers are now comfortable using it. They're familiar with it. And are they going to, so like I've been going around speaking to a lot of faculty at colleges. And at the beginning of every presentation or talk that I give, I ask, how many days per week do you use ChatGPT? And one of the options is have never used it. So far for college faculty, I'm seeing 70, 80% have never even used ChatGPT. And to me, that's just mind-boggling because this is a tool that's going to change not just the world, but not just education, but the world. And it's a tool that's going to change your job and you've never used it. So I tell them, you're used to giving assignments. I'm giving you an assignment. As soon as this presentation ends, go to ChatGPT through OpenAI, create a free account and start playing with it. It's so important. But yeah, a lot of teachers, they've not even investigated it yet. So I do believe some of the top players, some of the good marketing companies will survive because of convenience and familiarity, that they'll keep using it. But I think a lot of the smaller startups, I think they will definitely disappear, especially after today's announcement.
You know, one thing, Tim, when you just said that about like the familiarity, like that is huge, especially when it comes to something like AI, because just in and of itself, when you talk about artificial intelligence, I used to always say, well, I'm just, and teachers do that. They'll say, I'm just a third grade teacher. I'm just a math teacher. Where does this fit into what I'm doing? And I'm like, take out the word just. You have to embrace this, because whether or not you believe it, the kids are going to use it. You have to understand it, because there's ways it can benefit you. But to your point about the percentage, I've done probably, I don't know, somewhere between like 8 and 10 different sessions. And I always have a survey that I use in real time, whether it's in person or virtual, just to get an idea of people's comfort level, questions, concerns, all of that. And one of the things I have on there is, have you used ChatGPT? And all of those times, I mean, the lowest number, it was a 65% had not. But the last 3 sessions that I did, it was like 75, 76% had not done it. And to me, I'm like, I'm using it throughout the day because I like to test its like parameters and check it out. But like you said, I'm like, how can you not have, tried it out? And I like that your homework is, I always say, open a tab now, just open another tab and test it out and see. And I mean, there are concerns, obviously, but like, how do you understand it if you haven't tested it out to see what it is capable of? You want to assign an essay, okay, type your prompt into that and see what it generates and what is it capable of. But you have to, before you like pass a judgment on like, oh, well, this is going to be the end of like everything, if you haven't tested it out yet, like that is definitely step one.
Oh yeah, it's so important to become, familiar with what we're up against in terms of academic integrity and all that type of thing. And we're going to have to modify and change our assignments. So that's actually a trend that I see in education, is we have to change our assignments. We have to change our assessment, because the way education has been done for hundreds of years, they didn't have AI then. These assignments are becoming obsolete, and they're not going to work for the future. And we really need to look at, we need to prepare our students for their futures, not our past. We have to look at, what are the requirements in the job market? There's been surveys done of hiring managers that state, and I don't remember exactly, it's like 86%, 91% of hiring managers state that ChatGPT experience will be required to get hired. And as educators, I feel it's our obligation to expose our students to how to use that properly and how to get the best out of that tool, because it is going to be part of their future, whether we like it or not. It is here.
Perhaps to add on to that, I feel right now there's a massive push towards STEM. And I think that's great and needed. Although I fear that tools like ChatGPT are going to be making basic STEM very easy to do. And so I'm a big fan of cultivating the humanities, just because they are, if we're trying to create STEM people, essentially we're moving everybody into a field that machines are just quite good at and will in the future possibly be better at than we are. And so if we're trying to maintain a competitive edge as a species, I think it's important to take the humanities into the fold and not cast them aside. The arts, the humanities, I think if we add them together with the tech capabilities, I think that's where we can really make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So let's move on to our next question. What is the role of partnerships and collaborations with educational institutions in fostering EdTech innovation?
Like the wait time. You want to go, Silvan, or do you want me to take it?
You spoke first, so it's all you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, the way that I'm interpreting that question is I think about like just some of over the years, the companies that I've connected with and so forth, when I started to dive into doing presentations at conferences and things. And what I've noticed more is the investment that companies are making in really getting feedback from educators, because like we're the ones using the product, or it's our students. And so kind of, seeking volunteers for piloting and testing it out and giving them feedback. And I think that is really essential. Now, some of these companies that are out there, they are former educators, or at least somebody that's on the, the small, like 3-person team was an educator, and now they see this need, so they're designing this product. But getting it out there into the hands of educators and students, I think, that is the kind of partnership that I see. And it's like, whenever you can have a couple of teachers and you say, hey, we're looking for a few teachers to try this out, whatever the grade level is, content area, and then having that open communication, and then taking that information back and being able to kind of like redesign it. Think about, all right, well, this was great about it, this wasn't. Okay, what research do we need to do? What support can we offer? I think that's another thing that's kind of critical, especially, not everything is user-friendly for teachers, depending on their experience with tech. And so looking at, when you go to, like, when I go to a site, if things are kind of all over the place, or if it doesn't feel like there's support, or there's not videos or anything to kind of help me to navigate it, that's something that I think is really valuable when you are looking to form a partnership or collaborate with schools, and not necessarily like the whole school district. Ideally, you want to connect and be, district-wide or school-wide, but it does take those conversations and having that collaboration between, the person who's actually going to be using it, who then can say, hey, I tried this with my students. This was the impact. These are the benefits. We gave feedback. I had this support, and then taking that to the next level and having other people try it out. But I think those conversations and that back and forth testing and being open to, like, you know what, I really like what you've created and it's great, but I wish it had this. And there are a lot of companies that, they send out information and ask, like, what features do you feel are missing? Or what do you think is something that, like, this isn't any different than anything else that you would use? I love that aspect of people, like, really wanting to hear from the teachers and valuing the voice, but also having the flip side where the teachers get to understand the tech side of it too. And what I love the power of a story. So I always want to know, like, why did you create this product? Like, is it the financial thing, which is nice, but is it because you saw a gap or a need, and that's why you're working towards it? So I don't know. Those are just my off the cuff.
Yeah. So you mentioned a story. I have a story about my EFIT software, which is, as a kinesiology professor, for the classes I had an activity component, they would traditionally turn in either a Word document or Excel spreadsheet with their workouts on it. And I would look at it and I'd see copy and paste, because you did the same exact thing week after week. I know you didn't do this. So the question was, how do we make students accountable? Well, my colleague suggested students wear Fitbits and activity trackers. So we did that for a semester, and all the data came in, like, oh my gosh, how in the world do we grade this? This is crazy. So then I started writing EFIT, which takes all their data, it assigns grades based on specific criteria. It tracks their activity minutes, their steps, their fitness assessments, as well as and a lot of other things. And so now it makes the students very accountable. It makes it very easy for us to import the grades into the LMS system. And I think about this, had I not been teaching this class, if I was a developer only, I could have not made such a great product, because I'm using it every day and I'm seeing the needs for it. What do I need this to do for my classes and my colleagues' classes? So if you're not an educator and programming the stuff yourself, it's very important to have an educator working closely with you, because they're in the trenches and they're trying this stuff out and they're using it. They know what works and what doesn't. So in terms of collaboration for developers, definitely need to hook up with an educator to get the best type of feedback to really grow that product. And over the years, using it myself and my colleagues using it, I've been able to really fine tune the uses for it, and it's turned into a perfect, fabulous product for our needs. So I do think that's very important. And you also kind of mentioned it's a testing ground. You find out what works, what doesn't, and you can tweak and make adjustments from there. So that collaboration with an actual educator is, to me, extremely important. Silvan?
Yes, I agree. Testing is everything, particularly in the startup world. People make assumptions, and then even if you're sure that it's the right thing, you get proven differently. And I think with EdTech in particular, the challenge is how to measure the impact. So I think the average teacher in K-12 now uses over 100 different EdTech services and products. And it's not always really clear which of those are effective in the long term. It's difficult to test because we're talking over long time frames. What do you test? Do you see, okay, engagement rates, how much time do students spend on a platform, how many exercises do they do their grades improve? All of these obviously you can measure, but it's difficult then to isolate one specific product and to say this was the effect of product A versus product B if you're using 100 different products. So I think testing is key. The next challenge is that teachers don't really have time. All the educators I've spoken to is almost the main concern. Of course, next to salaries is how do you fit things into your day? And I feel there's almost a kind of tech fatigue going around where you have so many new products coming in that people are overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed sometimes. And so I feel having a good process of bringing technology in, of assessing it, I think that's key. And one startup I think is doing a really good job at this is Lean Lab Education. They partner with schools on the one hand and with EdTech startups on the other. And they try to systematically bring products in, test them, and see what works. But I think there's more room in that space for efficient testing, efficient assessment of what kind of products work.
All right. Yes, I agree. Let's move on to our third question, which has to do with scalability. So can you discuss the scalability challenges faced by EdTech startups when implementing innovative solutions in diverse educational settings and how they overcome these challenges? I know that was a mouthful, but hopefully you got it.
Sure, maybe I can start with this one. So I think the education sector is perhaps special compared to a few of the other sectors to traditional tech, I suppose, if we're talking about EdTech versus traditional tech, in that a lot of the products aren't going directly to the students, but are aimed at teachers or go through schools to reach students. So it's kind of B to B to C. And schools, just because of the way the educational system works, that you have large differences between districts. It's quite a challenge to get a product out there and to scale it. So I've seen loads of different approaches. I mean, you can build your own sales organizations and just sort of hammer it out and try to hire people who already have the personal contacts. You can try to seed a product in for the end user, so you can try to get it directly into the hands of teachers, into the hands of parents, and hope that if it catches fire, it builds the kind of pressure that will then convince district leaders to buy a product in bulk. Or of course, you can, I think, possibly a win-win model that might grow over the coming months and years might be that new startups partner up with some of the more traditional education companies, we're talking the Pearsons of the world, there's large companies which have amazing sales channels, and possibly might be looking for new innovative products to take into those channels.
Yeah, hooking on with the Pearson would definitely be a nice boost for any company.
Okay.
Anything you would like to add?
Well, I mean, I have a couple things popping around in my mind, because I flip it back to kind of like being in the school, just knowing when I work with some different EdTech companies, and their goal is like, we want to get into the schools and in the marketing and all that, those components of it, and they might have the best product and everything's lined up and all the resources and everything, but the problem is that on the opposite side of that, you have schools that have budgetary constraints, and so like they might totally want your product, and whatever it is that you're offering is like the answer to everything. It fits different grade levels, content areas. It's very versatile, but that's one of the challenges. The other component that I think of too is that sometimes, depending on what the actual product is, having something that's not just like it only does one thing. So it's meant like, you need products that can cater to different learning styles and learning needs. And I shouldn't even say learning styles, because that goes back and forth on whether that's a thing or not, but that can provide something for everybody. And there are some great products that have come and have disappeared because they were very limited in scope, and they had competitors that offered so many different things. One of which is, features when we're talking of things like accessibility. There are some products that were great that I used in my classroom years ago, but then other similar products came onto the scene and they had the immersive reader. And so when you compare two things like that, and you have something that can translate into more than 120 languages versus something that does the same function, that doesn't help. But the number one thing that came to mind, when you first asked, was like, the budget component of it. And I get asked that a lot. Also, looking at, depending on what it is too, like, is it something that requires a lot of training and support? Because sometimes that is something that sets schools, back from actually bringing something in. And a company might have, like I said, the answer to everything. It'd be super innovative, but there's these other factors that come in. Even things like privacy and security. A lot of companies that are non-US based, trying to get into the US market, are dealing with very different systems and requirements. And so sometimes that hinders any potential progress. Like, everything's great, but you have to, go over these hurdles right now too. And so that's another consideration. And things that I've had come up in conversation as to like, why isn't it like catching on? And it's like, well, here's just some of the factors. And then the time, I think Silvan, you had said something about like the time investment also is, I go to a website and I look, and I like to move around and find things, but for somebody who might be hesitant, the buy-in is tough too, because you might have teachers who are like, I don't have time. Like, this is great, but there's not enough time. So those are my top 3, maybe 4 things that came to mind.
Yeah, another thing that comes to my mind for scalability is, if you have a software selling to schools, who's paying for it? Is it coming out of a department budget? Is it coming out of the system budget? Or in the case of college, is the student purchasing it just like they purchase a college textbook? So certainly the easiest way in my experience, is it's a required part of the course that they purchase like a textbook. That way you don't deal with administrators, you don't deal with budget red tape. And so there's different routes to get in, and you have to find what's going to work best for your company, and take whichever path works best for you. All right, let's move on to user data and privacy. So I'll just go ahead and I'll jump into that. And in my experience, what schools are looking for is, number one, they want to be assured that the data is being transferred securely, it's being stored securely, it's a secure system, and they want to make sure that FERPA laws are being followed, and that the data is not being sold. So it's very important, I believe, to convince either the faculty or the teachers or the administrators that the data is very secure, it's encrypted, and it is not being sold or utilized in any other way than what's required for the purpose of the classroom itself. Privacy is a very big issue. I think, seems to me years ago, people didn't even think about it or consider it. It's just, you just do it. But I think now it's more of a hot topic where people always want to know what's the privacy. And I belong to some educator Facebook and LinkedIn groups that talk about privacy issues. And there's a lot of misconceptions, especially when it comes to ChatGPT. They'll say, you can't put that in there because it gets trained on their data. And I would just like to point out in ChatGPT, if you go to settings, you can turn off data sharing so that it's never ever used for training the data. And it's only stored on their servers for 30 days, should there be a legal issue, but after that's deleted. Now, in terms of the OpenAI API, that data is never ever used for training. So that's not a consideration or a concern when you're using some of these other programs that are using the API approach. But I'm speaking just for ChatGPT. It can be used very safely in terms of data security. There's a lot of other apps out there that I cannot say the same for. And, you know, there's some apps people say, I just signed up for ChatGPT and I had to pay $17. I'm thinking, what? $17 is not a pricing model. So there's all these apps that play themselves off as being ChatGPT when they are not. It's a private company trying to get people to pay money under false pretenses. If they're willing to do that, I cannot imagine what they're willing to do with all the data that they collect. So definitely stick to, you know, chat.openai.com and other platforms that are great like Claude and many others. Take some time to read the privacy policy so that you know exactly what you're sharing and what you're not sharing. And that's my wrap on that one.
Yeah, I will say one thing too about the settings and the data. Like back almost a year ago now, the fine print, like going to see what was being used with the information you're putting in the ChatGPT, like if you would go through and read all of their information, it was a little bit scary at first. And I know like time has evolved and so things have changed, but even with, you know, not even talking about things like ChatGPT or AI, just other tools that are out there, you know, there's a tendency that teachers are like, oh, I heard about this new tool and like we tried out and like, oh, it's awesome. You know, my kids love it. I love it. It's easy to create with. And there's that like misstep that happens. And I did this too. And it wasn't until working on my master's that we had to do an audit of different, you know, we had to pick 5 or so EdTech companies and tools that we commonly use and go through and look at all of their compliance, you know, the FERPA and everything, look at the fine print, when was the site last updated, and the privacy and the rating. And I was shocked at some of the ones that you know, that we use and most teachers use a lot at like the lack of privacy and what the fine print actually said and the ratings on some of those. And, you know, again, not defending the fact that like I didn't read or other teachers don't read the fine print, but you go into it thinking, oh, well, the company created this product and it's for educators, so of course they're going to follow and be compliant. And that's not always the case. I mean, like in some cases it is, because you might have educators who are like, hey, wait a minute, we have to really make sure we have things laid out about what we're doing with the information. Is it being shared to third parties? But I was surprised at doing that. And so from that moment on, I am super careful about reading the fine print of things to find out, like, is it being shared? Because a lot of times, you know, sure, I'll enter my information. Yeah, I'll answer some questions. And we think nothing of it. It's just, it seems like an innocent question they ask, but where does that information go? And like, we have to, I mean, as an educator, I need to know that because I'm guiding students, because they're on their devices. I mean, we're as adults, we're on our devices all the time, but understanding what is actually being done with our information so that you're not in for any surprises later on in life, like, how did that end up there? And you're like, oh, wait, it was that one time that I didn't read the privacy information, or some company wasn't in compliance with whatever the laws are. I mean, if they're US based, like the ones like FERPA and COPA, or was it GDPR if they're non-US based, and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think the more that a tech company is forthcoming with the information and says, has a statement here, we are in compliance with these laws. This is what happens with the information. If you have any questions, and it's visible, people can see it, not that they have to go on a scavenger hunt for it either. I think that helps to build, that, security, and that sense like, okay, I can trust this, and I know I can use it. My students' information is going to be safe and protected as well as mine.
Yeah, great points. I agree, of course. Data needs to be protected, and I think most companies do a fairly good job of using data just to improve their own product. I mean, it's gold. It makes it so much easier, talking from a startup perspective, to build a good product, to see where users are engaging, where they're not. Because of course, if you ask people, they will give you answers that may not match their actual behavior. Whereas if you have the raw data, it makes it a lot easier to get those answers. And then on another point, if you look at what's out there already, I mean, what people are willingly giving away in terms of data outside of school, outside of education, what people are sharing is incredible. Huge wealth of their data that's just given away. So sometimes I feel like the strict rules placed on education products, on the one hand, are of course necessary, but on the other hand, I wonder if it's holding back a part of tech and a part of our society that perhaps needs innovation the most. And so you wonder if perhaps either you want to create a more level playing field and extend regulation across other industries, or you might want to loosen up restrictions on the education sector. Just 2 cents.
Yes, good, very good points. So, Rachelle, how's your time doing?
Good. I got about 7 minutes.
Oh, wonderful. Then we'll get to another question.
Yeah.
So, how do EdTech startups leverage emerging technologies such as AI and machine learning to enhance the personalization of learning experiences? So I'll jump in on that one. The Pocket AI program that I created, one of the features that it offers is on the faculty dashboard. The faculty member can create an assignment. They input the instructions, which are the same instructions that the students receive. They input the grading rubric. Then on the student side, students log in and they put their paper in there that they wrote. What this does is when they submit that, it will compare what the student wrote to the grading rubric and the assignment. It gives them very specific feedback. So it'll say, your assignment calls for 3 things, you only mentioned 2, so expand on this idea. So that instant tutoring, I've been using that the last 3 semesters with my students, and the quality of papers being turned in has been increased. I've been very happy with the results of the students using that. And that instant tutoring is just really fantastic in terms of helping the student. B.F. Skinner and his learning machine, he researched and said the faster you receive feedback, the better learning can occur. So this is basically with AI, it's like B.F. Skinner's learning machine here that actually works because it's so instant. My sister is a 4th grade teacher, and she got parental permission for one of her students to use the Pocket AI feature. So in her classroom, she goes around from computer to computer and gives feedback to each student. So the one student used the Pocket AI feedback and got it instantly. And She texted me about 3 days later and she said, so-and-so comes into class every day beaming with excitement. He wants to write more papers because he loves the way it gave him that instant feedback. And I thought, wow, that is so powerful that you have a fourth grader that wants to write a paper. And with the instant feedback that AI is offering, people may not be beaming with excitement, but their learning, their understanding of things are going to be multiplied by that much more, that you don't have to wait a day or a week for someone to correct your paper. So, and I'm not talking about giving grades for the writing. I'm just talking about feedback to where you can rewrite it properly so that students can still maintain critical thinking skills, work their writing skills. And it's very important that we don't lose those skills, because AI used improperly could certainly lead to AI dependence, to where I don't need to write anything. I'll just have ChatGPT do it. And with properly assigned assignments and proper feedback, I see this as just accelerating learning across the field.
You want to go?
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Go for it, Rachelle.
Oh, all right. I always do the wait time. No, I mean, what you said, like the feedback for me, you know, some of the things that I've talked about with teachers is like, you know, the student who, I'm enrolled in some graduate courses now, and I had a statistics course this summer, and I've told this story so many times. It's like, it was a super struggle. It was an online course. I'm not that great at math. And that accessibility to get an answer from your teacher, you know, whether or not, I mean, you don't know how many students they have in a program, and they're not on their email all the time. And so I was like, okay, I need a tutor. I could watch a YouTube video, I could look at examples, but to have a system, you know, like ChatGPT in this case that I was using, to type in and say, okay, here's what I'm learning. Can you explain this to me like I'm at this level? Or can you give me some extra examples or something? And being able to give me some feedback about like what I didn't understand, but knowing that then when my teacher responded to me, I mean, it could have been that day, it could have been 3 days later, but it was going to get me to a point where at least I didn't give up. It's not a substitute for that human connection, but it gave me enough that I could like, okay, I kind of get this now. I can keep going. The other component of it that I really like, that I think about, and this goes back a couple of years, I remember testing out, and I always laugh when I say it, but a platform that it's Socrates, but I would call, I mean, Socrates, because there was the reference, if anybody's familiar, from years ago, but it had basically the personalized learning path. And at the time it had, I think, grades 3 and 5, like ELA and math, and the students would start at the same problem and task, but depending on how they answered, the pace that they answered, and as they moved through, which questions they got right or wrong, it would continue to adapt and, you know, provide them with extra practice in the areas that they needed it. Now, as a teacher, could we do that pre-technology? Yeah, you can figure out where kids are in learning and give the feedback. But like you mentioned, Tim, you know, like grading the assignments or the assessments, and then maybe it's over a break, maybe it's over a weekend. You know, that authentic and meaningful, timely feedback is important. But to be able to have something that has the AI enhancement where kids can start on the same thing and they're getting what they need in real time when they need it. And then the flip side, me as the teacher, I can see throughout in my dashboard, for example, like, oh, this student missed, I'll go verb conjugations with this one, just go with the Spanish part. And I can either go one-on-one conversation with them, or if I see across the board, all of my students were missing a certain concept, that helps me to better target my instruction in far less time and gives me more time back to work with my students and the relationship part of it. And so, you know, it's that logistical, clerical versus like the interpersonal, like the human aspect of it that I like so much. So, you know, like you mentioned, like the feedback, the personalized learning paths, and then even for things like, you know, like the natural language processing, like being able to ask a chatbot. I have a student that said, I had an AP Chem test and I just wanted somebody to like quiz me. There wasn't anybody around. So I was just typing in prompts, and I had my own personal tutor or assistant. And I mean, those are just a couple of the ways. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can use it, but we have to use it in a way that there's not that over dependence and over reliance on it, that it's going to substitute like our own skills that we need as educators and just in the world of work, but the skills of our students as well.
Yeah, very good points. I agree.
So,
Silvan?
Yeah, I love what you said. I completely agree that I think so the human factor is quite important, and I think personalization itself yields mixed results. So I think it always sounds great, and there's a lot of money being plowed into personalization. But I think what we don't want is a room full of kids sitting in front of their computers in their own little worlds without any interaction. I think, foundations, I think the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation has plowed $100 million into personalization initiatives, and we've seen quite mixed results there. And I think that's because personalization in itself is perhaps not the holy grail if it isn't combined with social factors. So I think human connection is key. It's a major factor in motivation. And within an educational setting, you always have that kind of trade-off between the group and the person. So I think the challenge that hopefully AI will help us solve is how we can combine personalization with good human connections. And I mean, one startup that I quite like that's doing great work in that field is CurioPod. They allow you to generate personalized answers and then combine that with students to generate discussion among students. And I think that's hopefully where things will go.
Yes, and I know Rachelle has to go, so I want to thank you for your contributions. You shared a lot of great information, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to get different perspectives and hear from both of your experiences, and give me some more information that I can always take back and talk to my STEAM students about, like, all the things that are happening out there and what I've learned, because for some reason they think that I don't keep on learning. And so it's good to be involved in these conversations, especially to learn about the work that you've both done and your insights too. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for moderating, Tim, and thank you for your contributions. Sorry. No.
I have one more question for you, Silvan. I know you have to go, Rachelle, so once you sign off, I'll ask Silvan. Okay. So in terms of EdTech, what do you see the educator's role in the future? Some faculty and teachers are scared, and am I going to be replaced by AI? Am I going to have a job in the future? What do you see as the future educator's role as it relates to EdTech?
Well, I'm a big believer in humans. So I think we've done rather well in adapting to technology in general over, the existence of our species. Whenever there's a new technology that comes in, we think, well, that's us. That's it for us. When the steam engine was introduced, you had protests all over the place. And yet you still have employment. It's just led to greater productivity gains. And I think something similar will happen in teaching. Right now, we have teacher shortages all over the place. So hopefully, I don't think that we'll go from teacher shortages to teacher surpluses in all too short of a time frame. What I can see, I have friends working, for example, on hologram teachers, not to replace teachers, but to sort of amplify a teacher. So what I could see happening is that if we don't have enough teachers for larger class sizes, you could, use technology, whether it's holograms or whether it's other software, personalization software, that allows the teacher to take on actually a bigger role to reach more people, and perhaps also reach people who previously couldn't be reached in remote regions, regions without well-functioning school systems. So I think it's going to be a great time for teachers, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And educators offer something that AI will never be able to do, and that's that human connection that you mentioned earlier. And just motivating students. We have experience. We have real world experience that we're sharing with our students that AI can't. It doesn't have the same experiences that we do. So I don't see our jobs as educators going away, at least not in my lifetime. And if we do a good job, if we stay cutting edge and current, I think some teachers may work themselves out of a job if they become the dinosaurs where they don't adapt to all these new changes taking place. If students start reading on Rate My Professor and they see one professor doing all types of really cool things with VR, AR, AI, fun, exciting learning projects, and then you have another teacher that's doing 10 essays, I know a class I'm going to sign up for, and that other professor or teacher is just not going to get that many signups, and they will push themselves out of a job. But as long as you stay current, I think there will always be a need for educators. Is there anything else you would like to add before we sign off?
I think that's pretty much it. I think it's been a fascinating panel. I've really enjoyed talking with you and with Rachelle, and I think I'll let things sink in, and hopefully we've been able to to put some interesting notions out there.
Yes, I thank you for all your feedback. You said a lot of really great things that I appreciate hearing. So Rachelle's gone, but thanks to Rachelle as well, and thanks to Arbisoft for hosting this. So with that said, I will go ahead and sign off, and wish you a great evening or day, depending on where you're at.
It's an evening here on the East Coast in Boston. Have a wonderful evening, you too.
All right, thanks. Take care, everyone.